The clatter of a plastic tray hitting the floor was the first sound I registered. My wife Sarah stood there, her 8-month pregnant belly straining against her maternity dress. Her eyes, usually so warm, were chips of ice. They weren't looking at me, David Miller, her husband of 10 years. They were locked on Chloe, the nurse sitting across from me, whose hand had been casually resting on my arm moments before. Well, Sarah's voice was dangerously calm, a low tremor promising a storm. "Isn't this cozy?" The entire hospital cafeteria went silent. Every head turned. My world, so carefully constructed at Sterling Construction Group, was about to detonate. I felt Chloe's hand flinch away like she'd been burned. My name is David Miller. At Sterling Construction Group, I build empires of steel and glass. I control billion-dollar deals from downtown Dallas boardrooms. Control is everything. And in that fluorescent-lit cafeteria, I had none. Sarah took a deliberate step forward, her eyes never leaving Chloe. "You must be Chloe," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The nurse from the maternity ward. How convenient." Chloe shrank back, her cheeks flaming red. We were just talking." A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. "Talking? About what, exactly? His baby's due date? Or were you two comparing notes on his performance?" She finally turned her gaze on me, a look of pure disgust twisting her beautiful features. "Don't you dare try to manage this, David. This isn't one of your construction projects you can just bulldoze over." I opened my mouth, but only a pathetic croak came out. "Sarah, please, not here." It was the weakest, most cowardly thing I'd ever said. And I knew instantly, from the predatory gleam in her eyes, it was exactly the fuel her fire needed. Her eyes, that predatory gleam, it rewound the last 3 months in a sickening flash. Before this, we were the Dallas power couple, David and Sarah Miller. We were a brand. Our life was a series of curated victories. My latest high-rise for Sterling Construction Group, featured in architectural digests. Her charity galas raising millions. Our photos splashed across society pages. I managed risk. I controlled outcomes. Our marriage was my most successful project, a testament to precision and careful planning. We had everything, and it was all exactly where I wanted it to be. Then came the pregnancy. It was planned, of course, the next logical step in our blueprint for a perfect life, but I hadn't accounted for the emotional fallout. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of Sarah's universe anymore. The baby was. Our conversations, once about deals and deadlines and us, became a relentless stream of nursery colors, birthing plans, and folic acid. I became a supporting character in my own home, a walking wallet tasked with assembling furniture I couldn't comprehend. Sarah, my partner, was becoming a mother, a stranger who looked at me not with admiration, but with a checklist in her eyes. I was losing control. That's when I met Chloe. It was during one of Sarah's endless prenatal appointments. I'd slipped away to the cafeteria, desperate for a moment's peace. Chloe was on her break. She wasn't overtly glamorous, not like Sarah. She was simple, easy. She smiled, and her eyes didn't hold a list of expectations. She recognized me, not as Sarah's husband, or the guy who can't find the right screwdriver, but as David Miller of Sterling Construction. She'd read an article about the new Vantage Tower project. She asked questions. She listened. My ego, starved for months, drank it in like a dying man finding water. It started with coffee. Just coffee. A stolen 30 minutes where I could talk about my world, the one I actually understood. I told myself it was harmless. I was under immense pressure at work, and Sarah was preoccupied. Chloe was an escape valve. She admired me. She didn't need anything from me but my time. That coffee became lunch. Lunch became a lie to Sarah about a late meeting. Each step was a small, calculated risk, the kind I took every day in business. I was compartmentalizing. I was managing it, I convinced myself I still had everything under control. The sheer arrogance of meeting her here, in the very hospital where my wife was preparing to give birth to my child, is staggering now. It was a power play, a foolish thrill. I was David Miller, master of my domain, juggling two worlds effortlessly. But looking at Sarah's face now, a mask of cold surgical fury, I see the truth. I wasn't managing a project, I was standing on a fault line of my own making, and I'd just triggered the earthquake myself. This wasn't a risk, it was a demolition, and I was standing at ground zero. Sarah ignored my pathetic plea. Her gaze shifted back to Chloe, who looked like she wanted the linoleum floor to swallow her whole. "A piece of advice, nurse," Sarah said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "When you try to poach a husband, check his wife's schedule. Choosing the maternity ward cafeteria, it's just sloppy work. I expected better." Chloe's mouth opened and closed, a goldfish gasping for air. A few onlookers snickered. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave rolling through the room. "Sarah, stop it," I managed, finally finding my voice, trying to assert some semblance of control. "Let's go home. We'll talk." She turned to me, a slow, deliberate movement. A chilling smile touched her lips, but it never reached her eyes. "Oh, this is exactly the place, David. You chose the venue. I'm just providing the entertainment." She pulled out her phone. The clinical pic of the camera shutter echoed in the dead silence. She had just taken a picture of me and Chloe, frozen in our shared guilt. My blood ran cold. "What are you doing?" I hissed, a new kind of panic clawing at my throat. This was social media, a digital wildfire I couldn't possibly contain. "Documenting," she said simply, typing on her screen with terrifying speed. "For my records, and perhaps for a few interested parties." She looked up from her phone, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that stripped me bare. "Did you really think I didn't know, David? You, the master of risk management, the king of compartmentalizing, you're not that good." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a spontaneous discovery, this was an ambush. "I've known for 6 weeks," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that everyone in the vicinity could still hear. "Ever since I saw the charges for the Dalton Hotel on our American Express statement. You listed it as client entertainment. I guess in a way, she was." Sarah flicked her eyes towards Chloe, dismissing her as an irrelevant detail. "I just needed the right moment to collect my evidence. And you pathetic cliché, you handed it to me on a plastic tray." She was right. I hadn't been managing anything. I'd been walking into a perfectly laid trap. The curated victories, the blueprint for a perfect life. She had been building something else entirely, right under my nose, a counter-strategy. She slid her phone back into her purse. The finality of the gesture felt like a cell door slamming shut. "I'm going to my mother's," she announced, her voice returning to its normal, calm volume. It was all the more terrifying for it. "My things will be gone by the time you get home. Don't call me, don't text me, don't try to manage this." She took a step towards the exit, then paused and looked back at me, one last time. The predatory gleam was back, brighter than ever. "My lawyer, however, will be in touch. With you, and with the board at Sterling Construction. I was just reading your executive partnership agreement last night. Fascinating section on the morality clause. Let's see how well your empire of steel and glass holds up when the foundation is rotten." And with that, she turned and walked away, her back straight, leaving me in the ruins of the life I thought I controlled, with the flash of her camera still burning behind my eyes. The sound of Sarah's footsteps faded, but the silence she left behind was a physical weight, pressing in on me. Every eye in that cafeteria was on me, a jury of strangers passing a silent, unanimous verdict. I felt a trembling hand on my sleeve. "Chloe." "David? What do we do?" Her voice was a pathetic whisper, thick with tears she was trying to hold back. I turned and looked at her, really looked at her. The easy smile was gone, replaced by raw panic. I saw nothing of the woman who admired me, only a loose end, a fatal misjudgment. "There is no we," I said. The words were ice. I pulled my arm from her grasp. This was a mistake. You were a mistake. Go back to your shift. Her face crumpled. But she has a picture. She knows my name. My job. That sounds like your problem, I said, standing and smoothing the front of my suit jacket, an automatic gesture of restoring order. You were sloppy. The words were Sarah's, but they fit perfectly in my mouth. I walked toward the exit. I didn't run. I walked with the same measured pace I used when leaving a boardroom after closing a hostile negotiation. The stairs followed me, 100 pinpricks on my back, but they didn't matter. The public humiliation was a surface wound, a temporary inconvenience. The real damage, the existential threat, was what she said last. Tantra morality clause. The words echoed in my head, not as a wife's betrayal, but as a competitor's perfectly executed move. My sterling construction partnership agreement. I could picture the dense legalese of Section 12, subsection C, a relic, standard boilerplate, to protect the firm's reputation. But Sarah wasn't just anyone. She was Sarah Miller, darling of the Dallas social scene, a woman who charmed the wives of every single board member at her last charity gala. She knew them. She knew their secrets, their ambitions, their weaknesses. She wouldn't just leak the story. She would orchestrate its release with surgical precision, ensuring maximum impact. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a calculated corporate strike. By the time I reached the sterile quiet of the parking garage, the shock had completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar focus. The air, thick with the smell of exhaust and concrete, felt like my natural habitat. Sarah had made a critical error. She thought my affair was a weakness, an emotional failing. She was wrong. It was simply a poorly managed asset. She had declared war thinking she was attacking a cheating husband. She was about to find out she was in a fight with David Miller. I got into my car and sat for a moment in the silence. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't call my own lawyer. I scrolled to a number buried deep in my contacts, a man who didn't build things, but specialized in controlled demolitions of reputations. Sarah wanted a war. She had no idea what the rules of engagement were. The phone rang twice before a voice, smooth as polished granite, answered. David. No greeting, no preamble. Lazarus, I said, my voice steady. I have a situation. Domestic, but with significant professional exposure. A beat of silence. I could picture him in his minimalist downtown office, a place devoid of personality, a sterile environment for dissecting human frailty. Exposure to Sterling? He asked. His only concern. My wife. She has initiated a conflict. She's threatening to activate the morality clause in my partnership agreement. I laid it out clinically, stripping away the cafeteria, the pregnancy, the betrayal. I presented it as a hostile takeover bid for my life. There's photographic evidence of an entanglement. She's well connected with the board's social circle. She intends to detonate this publicly. The target is not you, David. The target is the firm's reputation. You're just the delivery mechanism, Lazarus stated, his voice a chillingly calm diagnostic tool. Who is the third party? A nurse. Irrelevant. A tactical error. No one is irrelevant, he corrected me softly. They are either an asset or a liability. Right now, she's a liability you've left in the field. Who is your wife? Sarah Miller. You know her profile. Charity circuit, impeccable reputation, currently 8 months pregnant. That last detail hung in the air. Lazarus, for the first time, paused. Ah, he said, that complicates the optics. A pregnant woman scorned is a powerful narrative. Sympathy is her primary weapon. You have none. I don't need sympathy, Lazarus. I need a strategy. I need to reframe the narrative before she gets to publish the first draft. To reframe, you need a more compelling story, he said, the gears of his mind audibly turning. Aggression is the wrong move. The board won't stomach an attack on a pregnant woman, no matter how justified. You cannot fight her on her terms. You must change the battlefield. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather cool beneath my knuckles. How? She's positioned herself as a righteous victim. We must position her as an unreliable narrator. You say she's pregnant. Has the pregnancy been difficult? The question was loaded, a surgeon probing for a weakness. I thought of the last few months. Her mood swings, the exhaustion, her obsessive focus on the baby. Normal pregnancy symptoms. But in the hands of a master manipulator, normal was a subjective term. She's been emotional, I said, the words tasting like poison and opportunity. Volatile at times. Not herself. Good, Lazarus said, the single word dripping with dark potential. That's our cornerstone. We don't deny your indiscretion, we absorb it. We make it a symptom of a larger, more tragic problem. A cold, brilliant clarity washed over me. The path forward was suddenly illuminated, and it was devastatingly simple. The narrative isn't David Miller, the adulterer, Lazarus continued, articulating the thought as it formed in my own mind. It's David Miller, the devoted husband, struggling to manage his wife's tragic prenatal breakdown. Your affair wasn't a betrayal. It was a moment of weakness under immense strain, seeking solace from a caretaker. My God! It was perfect. It was monstrous. She's not sick, I said, a flicker of the old David, the husband, momentarily surfacing. It doesn't matter what she stalks, Lazarus countered sharply. It only matters what she can be perceived to be. We seed the story that you're worried about her. Deeply, that her behavior has become erratic. Paranoid. The cafeteria incident wasn't her catching you. It was a public outburst. A cry for help. You weren't having a tryst. You were ambushed by her delusions. He laid out the steps with the precision of a military campaign. First, the nurse, Chloe. She was a loose end. You need to get to her, not with threats, with concern. You apologize for putting her in the middle of your wife's episode. You offer to pay for her legal counsel to protect her from Sarah's harassment. You turn her from a co-conspirator into another victim of Sarah's instability. You make her your ally. Second, the board. You don't wait for her lawyer. You get ahead of it. Tonight, you call Marcus Thorne. You go to him tomorrow morning, hat in hand. Not as a guilty partner, but as a terrified husband. You confess your worry for Sarah. You tell him she's making wild accusations, that you're trying to get her help. You show him a carefully curated string of her recent emotional texts. You control the story by telling it first. My mind raced, recontextualizing months of conversations. Her text about feeling overwhelmed by the nursery plans. Her tearful call after a difficult doctor's appointment. Her frustration with me working late. Individually, they were moments in a marriage. Strung together, presented through the lens of mental instability, they became a damning portrait. She has the picture, Lazarus. A picture of what? You and a nurse sitting at a table? Without context, it's nothing, and we are about to provide the context. A context so tragic and sympathetic that her picture becomes proof of her instability, not your infidelity. The plan was a work of art. It took Sarah's greatest weapon, her pregnancy, and turned it against her. It would neutralize her social capital, discredit her evidence, and recast me as a long-suffering saint. It was a controlled demolition of her reality. I'll need a file on her, I said. Anything we can use. Family history of mental health issues, any erratic spending, any arguments with friends. We need to build the foundation for this. Already on it, Lazarus said. Consider it done. Make the call to Thorne, David. The war is won by the one who fires the first shot. He hung up. I sat in the concrete silence of the garage. The man Sarah married was gone, burned away in the fluorescent lights of that cafeteria. In his place was a strategist. She thought she was fighting a husband. She was fighting a corporation. I scrolled through my contacts, past Sarah's name, past my lawyers, until I found the number for Marcus Thorne, the chairman of the board at Sterling Construction. He was an old-world Texan who valued loyalty and stability above all else. He was a father and a grandfather. He would be receptive to a story about a man trying to save his family. My thumb hovered over the call button. Sarah had wanted to see my empire crumble. She didn't realize I wasn't just the architect, I was the foundation, and I would bury anyone who tried to threaten it. I pressed the button. The next morning, I sat in Marcus Thorne's leather-bound office, the scent of old money and cigar smoke thick in the air. I didn't present a defense. I offered a confession of love and fear. I showed him the texts, carefully selected to paint a portrait of a woman unraveling. "I love her, Marcus," I said, my voice pitched with the perfect note of strained desperation. "But she's not herself. This pregnancy, it's changed her. She's become paranoid, accusatory. She staged a scene at the hospital yesterday. I'm terrified for her, for the baby." I let my head fall into my hands. I made a mistake. I sought comfort, and she found out. But her reaction, it's disproportionate. It's not rational. Marcus, a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities, looked at me not as a philanderer, but as a man managing a volatile family crisis, threatening the firm's stability. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Son, you get your house in order. We'll contain this. Family comes first." The first shot had been fired, and it had hit its mark. Lazarus's machine worked with silent, devastating efficiency. Within 48 hours, the narrative had been reshaped. The whispers I heard were no longer of my infidelity, but of poor, tragic Sarah. Her friends called me, not with accusations, but with tentative offers of support. "We've been worried too, David. She seemed so fragile." I had successfully reframed her righteous fury as unhinged hysteria. I even met with Chloe, expressed my deepest regrets for her being caught in my wife's episode, and handed her the card of a lawyer paid for by an anonymous retainer. She looked at me with gratitude. Another pawn moved into position. I was in control. The demolition of Sarah's credibility was proceeding on schedule. I had turned her army of sympathizers into my own protective detail. For 3 weeks, there was silence from Sarah's side. No lawyers' letters, no social media posts, nothing. I assumed she was isolated, licking her wounds, her credibility neutralized before she could even launch an attack. The quiet felt like victory. I started sleeping again, the cold confidence returning to my veins. I was David Miller. I managed outcomes. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. It wasn't Lazarus. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Sarah's mother, her voice stripped of all warmth. "She's at Presbyterian. She's in labor." A surge of adrenaline hit me. This was it. The final act. I would rush to her side, the picture of the devoted husband, solidifying my narrative in the place where it had almost been destroyed. I could see the scene. Me, holding her hand, forgiving her outburst, welcoming our child into the world, the benevolent patriarch restoring order to his troubled family. I dressed quickly, my mind already scripting the dialogue. I strode into the maternity ward like I owned it, my suit immaculate, my expression a mask of grave concern. But I was stopped before I even reached the nurse's station. A doctor, a woman in her 50s with tired, intelligent eyes, stepped in front of me. Her name tag read, Dr. Eris. Behind her, Sarah's mother stood like a statue, her face a stone carving of contempt. "Mr. Miller," the doctor said, her voice low and devoid of pleasantries. "I'm Dr. Eris, Sarah's doctor." "How is she? Is the baby here?" I asked, injecting my voice with urgency. "Sarah is in recovery from an emergency C-section," she said, her eyes pinning me in place. "She had a severe case of preeclampsia. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. We had to deliver the baby immediately to save them both." "My God," I breathed, playing my part. Is the baby okay?" "Your son is in the NICU. He's stable for now." She took a small step closer, her voice dropping further. A blade meant only for me. We see preeclampsia all the time, Mr. Miller. But a sudden, acute spike like Sarah's is almost always triggered by one thing: extreme emotional distress, a shock to the system. She held my gaze, and I saw no room for manipulation, no angle to play. There was only cold, medical certainty. Sarah told me what happened in the cafeteria 3 weeks ago. The public humiliation, the confrontation. My blood turned to ice. My carefully constructed story, my narrative of her paranoia, it all evaporated under the harsh fluorescent light of medical fact. You can't spin a blood pressure reading. You can't reframe a seizure. Your actions, the doctor continued, each word a hammer blow, are the direct, medical cause of your wife's life-threatening condition and your son's premature birth. This isn't a marital spat, Mr. Miller. This is a clinical event. It's all in her chart. Her chart. A legal document. Undeniable. Irrefutable. Sarah hadn't needed a lawyer. She hadn't needed social media. She had waited. And her own body had provided the evidence. It was justice, delivered not by a court, but by. My meticulously built world didn't just detonate, it was vaporized. Her chart. The words were a verdict from a power far greater than any board of directors. Lazarus's strategy, my counteroffensive, my entire perception of control. It was all fiction. I hadn't been playing chess. I'd been a bull charging at a matador, and Sarah had just driven the sword home. Her mother, Catherine, finally moved. She stepped past the doctor, her face a mask of cold fury. "You did this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "We all saw her spirit breaking under your management. This isn't just an affair, David. This is attempted destruction." Before I could form a defense, a woman in a razor-sharp charcoal suit appeared at the end of the hall, her heels clicking with grim purpose. She didn't look at me with pity or contempt, but with the dispassionate focus of a predator that has cornered its prey. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice as crisp as a legal filing. "I'm Eleanor Vance. I represent your wife." She extended a hand not to me, but to the doctor. "Dr. Aris, thank you for your clarity. We'll be deposing you, of course." She then turned her full attention to me. The morality clause at Sterling isn't about embarrassing photos anymore. It's about conduct resulting in demonstrable, life-threatening harm to your family. I've already spoken with Marcus Thorne this morning. He's reevaluating your position in light of this clinical event. She used the doctor's exact words, twisting the knife. "You will not see Sarah," Catherine interjected, her voice iron. "And you will not see your son. Not until Sarah decides if she ever wants him to meet the man who almost cost him his life before it even began." Eleanor Vance gave a slight, satisfied nod. "A restraining order is being filed as we speak. You'll be served shortly. For now, I suggest you leave the premises." I stood there, stripped bare in the sterile corridor, the master of my domain, exiled from my own life. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. They had the chart. They had the truth. And all I had was the ringing silence where my empire used to be. My son was in an incubator 100 feet away, a life I had endangered, and I was being dismissed like a trespasser. My defeat wasn't just professional or financial. It was absolute. I have to ask, who do you think is more in the wrong here? The cheating husband or the nurse who knew he had a pregnant wife? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.